does have it does allow for like, for smokestacks, that would be like, even like, not, not cemeteries, but, what is it when you,
Crematories.
is it? Like mausoleum, or not mausoleum. I2 is more dense, I3 is denser still, so it allows for, more higher density, more, impervious area. There's a lot fewer rules when it comes to I3, so when you start to try to develop that, you're really exempt from pretty much almost anything. You can have like gravel parking, you know, you don't have landscaping, everything really becomes reduced. And it's meant for super high density and high impact on development areas. So, yeah, offhand, I don't have them memorized. But let's see.
Well, on this map, we see I1, I2, and I3. We see all three of them, which is unusual.
It was a crematory. That's what I was thinking of. I1 is a crematory. I2 is like distribution facilities, assemblies, sign painting, research center, testing labs, warehouses, tool and die shops, welding. Another example of uses in I3 would be outdoor storage, food production, processing, distribution facilities, concrete, ready mix plant, wastewater treatment, water treatment, utility, warehouse, welding. So much higher incidences of probably of employees, also noise, in and out truck traffic. So kind of just increases in intensity as it goes up in the industrial.
Thank you. Any more questions? That was, you got a long answer to your question, didn't you, Mike?
I'm used to it. No, it was good. I appreciate it. I just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah.
No expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else have a burning thought at this point? Because we've talked about so many different things. So, well, we'll be meeting again on February 27th, so if anything comes up, save that thought and we'll talk about it then. And thank you, everybody. Our meeting is in recess.
No,
We'll just be out of the country.
source for the TIF itself.
There we go.
Is the funding source for the TIF itself to be able to reimburse the developer or for this board to have an operating budget. That's the core situation of a TIF, is really that. And utilizing or leveraging that increase in the assessed valuation in order to pay for, say, we financed or took bonds out to put some infrastructure in, water, sewer, power, internet, whatever it may be, roads. If that area was in need of that infrastructure to allow the area to then develop. That's really like the school book case for redevelopment commission. We need an industrial park. We have an area that industrial park would fit. However, it doesn't have the necessary infrastructure for it to be an industrial park. So it's not the type of situation in which the private market is going to feel, and hasn't felt, because that's why you have a history here, hasn't felt it was economically viable in that circumstance to be able to, or it was too risky to go ahead and do that. The Redevelopment Commission can come in, put a TIF over the top, and at that point in time, the increase, and then put the infrastructure in, whether it's roads, power, et cetera. And once those are in, then that AV that we have grabbed or sequestered, okay, goes back to pay for that infrastructure that we either paid for or financed, which then allows for that area to actually develop or redevelop. And so that is the kind of the tool. Now, it can be used in many different formats, but that's the basic idea of a TIF, is sequestering or setting aside, whatever term of art we want to use, the increase in the assessed valuation in order to pay for the improvements that were needed to have that area develop or redevelop. And so we have those tools as a board, and I think that's ultimately the biggest responsibility of this board, is to explore those opportunities and see if those make sense. That was one of the ideas, or one of the main driving forces some of you were here for when we did the Route 6 TIF, was to be able to capture that additional AV as we went in and did things in that area to try to increase the valuation and to make it, in this case, redevelop. And then also we wanted to have a centrally located industrial park, non-smokestack, that would allow for some industrial growth in the center of the county that also happened to have their ingress and egress coming off a state road and not one of our local roads that we are struggling to maintain as it is. So that was the logic behind go ahead and getting that put into a TIF, getting that anchor, which happened to end up being Casey's, and again, to not lose that commercial up on 6, but behind it, put that industrial park in, and now we're waiting as that goes along. We've had some ideas on how to potentially move that along a little bit further, and those are some things in the coming months that we can talk about here. But that really is kind of at its core what the Redevelopment Commission's attempting to do. The Redevelopment Commission has some strange rules when you look at the rest of county government. This board is what controls its own budget, its own expenditures, and its own projects. That's why we have council and commissioner representation on this board, is because this board does not turn around and go back to the commissioners or back to the council to have things approved. This board does its own business. Now, there might be a pit stop at Plan Commission or things along those lines as you're creating a TIF, but ultimately this board is governing itself. This board is setting its own budget. This board is handling its own business, so to speak, okay? Also what this board does, with the help of Mary Jane, is does locate, cultivate, and go through those litany of grant possibilities out there for whatever might fit our circumstances. And that's where some of the things that we've done with the USDA and different areas in the county that would qualify for some of those residential things that we've dealt with. And then because, again, generally speaking, if the South Haven TIF, as it starts to begin to make money, we do have some statutory guidelines as to where we can spend that money. We need to try to spend that in that TIF. That's what the law is telling us to do. But I want you to understand that where most of our funding has come from has either been a carryover from the hospital tax abatement, and I'll come back to that in a moment, or the commissioner's local income tax budget, one of their lit budgets, is budgeting. It had been budgeting about $500,000, and I think it's now maybe $250,000 a year. So our available funds, or that cash balance, so to speak, is really does not have the same handcuffs on it than the TIF revenue would have. On the hospital abatement, why would the Redevelopment Commission get money for the hospital tax abatement? Well, back when that hospital tax abatement was done, one of the caveats allowed by the statute for tax abatement that the council utilized at that time was that you could have an additional provision. And that provision basically says that, I believe it's 10% of the savings. So if you're the hospital and your abatement saved you $1 million in that given tax year, 10% of that got paid, of that savings got paid to this Redevelopment Commission. That's how this board funded the 700 North Development, Management, and Stormwater Building / Highway building up on 700. We funded that building and that build-out with that hospital tax abatement money that was flowing in from there. So the money that we currently have on hand, 95% of it is either local income tax money or remainder of unspent hospital tax abatement money from that time period. So that's where our money has come from. That's basically a large scope of what the Redevelopment Commission does. I think last year, and maybe coming up again this year, depending on what happens, Operation Ribeye, that's the name of it?
Yes.
Project Ribeye. Same type of situation. They had a infrastructure need. Their need was they needed to put a pre-treatment center in their proposal, and then there was going to be a significant sewer line run from them to the town. They were looking for aid in that, and so we hadn't finished the process because they slowed us down, but we were going to go through the process of potentially tiffing them. Okay, so as it sits right now, it's just a corner. That would set the AV. The addition of the project itself would have increased AV significantly. That additional AV plus the tax rate would have given us the additional funds that then would have been utilized to pay for that sewer infrastructure going in to allow the project to actually mature and to be built out. So that's another example of this commission attempting to utilize those tools that we have to aid larger projects like that. I would say that if another large project, something even larger than Project Ribeye, were to come in, chances are they're going to have a pit stop here for something. They're going to want to utilize some sort of TIF, some sort of payment, some sort of infrastructure. It's pretty fairly routine for those larger projects to come in and at least assess what's available, what this board could do, and what that payment, that repayment may or may not look like. So this is a board that can do lots of things. It can have lots of impact. It has traditionally, which does not mean it has to continue this way, but it has traditionally been fairly conservative in its tiffing. That's a whole nother discussion of the effect of tiffing overall. But when the projects were correct and those things were lining up and those seemed to be in the best interest of the county or the unincorporated portions, we have put those TIFs in place to allow those things to move forward. So Project Ribeye is a good example. That wasn't something that we were necessarily out cultivating. But through the process that they were going through with other cities and towns, they ended up getting here and attempting to go up the flagpole with us. And maybe if some things line up again for them, they might be back this year. So be happy to answer any questions. We have concentrated in the past on the Route 6 corridor. It seemed at the time to be a natural place to concentrate, as it's the closest we have to an urban center and unincorporated. That entire South Haven area is the densest non-urbanized area in the state of Indiana. So we were focusing there with code enforcement, the TIF district, along with that developer to try to get some of that industrial park to come online, and to be able to continue to try to work our way through South Haven, whether that was, buying up lots on tax sale or potentially utilizing unsafe building. It was basically to go in and try to beautify that South Haven corridor, because it also has some really unique features. It's got 2 state roads. It's basically in the middle of the county, and it's unincorporated, and none of us can see a future in which that's being annexed by anybody anytime soon. So in another way of saying it, it's our problem, okay? And this would seem to be the only board that would have the ability to effectuate change in that area. But doesn't mean that we haven't looked at things down all the way down by Hebron. That was Project Ribeye, or all things over more in the Malden area. But we're looking for those areas, something that makes sense, that moves something forward. And so, again, any questions, just let me know.
Anybody have any questions?
Just to clarify, as you spoke about the tax abatement and the 10% fee that comes in here, that fee is actually, in essence, is paid by the taxpayer to the commission in a sense, right?
Correct.
It's not money that's coming from the county or anywhere that collected it.
Correct.
That fee is from that taxpayer.
Correct. So in that example, the hospital, the owners of the hospital were paying, if you saved $1 million in my brutal example, well, then you owed 10% of that to the Redevelopment Commission. And then that taxpayer, the owners of the hospital, would pay that, and that's the money that would come here.
Anybody else? You ready to administer the oath?
All right. Everyone's going to have to sign one. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. All right, I'm going to have everybody stand. We're going to do the oath here. I state your name.
I, Barb Pregnant,
Do solemnly swear that I will
do solemnly swear that I will
support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Indiana,
support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Indiana,
and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge my duties
and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge my duties
as a member of the Porter County Redevelopment Commission
as a member of the Porter County Redevelopment Commission,
according to law and to the best of my ability, so help me God.
according to the law and to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Thank you.
So do we
Everybody,
print and then sign?
yep, print your name after I and then sign and send them down, and I'll sign them all and give them back to the keeper of records.
And Scott, why do we do this for this board and we don't do this for? I'm just curious.
It's what the state statute requires.
Good enough.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to organization. Can I have a nomination for president?
I nominate Barb Rednitz.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a nomination and a second for me for president. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, nomination for a vice president. I'm going to nominate Mike Brickner for vice president. Do we have a second?
Second?
Second.
We have a nomination and 2 seconds for Mike Brickner for vice president. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Aye. No, kidding. On this board, we don't ask if you're interested, I guess. Just go with it.
Okay.
Didn't look up. See, everybody else looked up, Mike.
All right, I'm looking for a nomination for secretary. Okay, I'm going to nominate Bill Herring for secretary. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a nomination and a second for Bill Herring for secretary. All in favor, say aye. Aye, all opposed, same sign. And finally, last but not least, a nomination for legal counsel. Do we have a nomination?
I would be interested, since that was a topic of conversation on the last.
Nominate Scott.
Okay, we have a nomination. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a we have a nomination and a second for Scott McClure for legal counsel. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Alrighty, we are moving down to the approval of the service agreement. Do you want to explain this, please, Mary Jane?
Dan Bowditch has provided financial advisory services to this commission in the past, and it's being suggested that Dan continue to provide that service at the rate that he has in the past. And that's what's in his proposal.
And what kinds of things has he done in the past, if you can just...
He has
That brief.
done the financial projections for Project Ribeye, and that's the one that I'm only familiar with and the one that I have read most recently. In the past, I have worked with Dan on other projects, not necessarily in Porter County, and he provides a wide array of financial services to assist in bond issues, in sizing, in projecting costs and things like that. And maybe Scott knows some more that he may have done.
Project Ribeye, I think Project Ribeye was the last large financials that he was dealing with.
And Scott, you've reviewed the service.
I have.
Don't have any problems with
I
it?
do not.
Okay, then I'm going to open this up. We have a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the service agreement for Daniel Bowditch for financial
Advisory
services. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
Okay, we are moving along. I asked Mary Jane to put this topic on the agenda because this is something that has been near and dear to my heart. And one of the things I feel that can be helpful in terms of guiding us in terms of inspiration and vision, clarity and direction is to actually reach out to our business community in unincorporated Porter County and just chat with them about what things are they finding help them to be successful, and what are some of the things that they're finding that are, keeping them from being as successful as they might be from their perspective. And Bill and I know from mentoring business owners is that business owners tend to have a pulse on the economy because without even knowing it, they're pivoting. They're constantly having to adjust and make course corrections as we're seeing micro shifts in the economy and so forth. And so I was hoping to open this up to the board and talk about possibly some ideas of how we could engage the business community. Now, I'm not talking about in municipalities because they have their chambers, they have their ways of communicating their needs and their wishes. I'm trying to figure out a way that we could potentially tap into our business owners and community in unincorporated Porter County. Bye, Mike. Anybody have any ideas?
To start, Barb and I had talked about working with Chuck and GIS just to come up with a list of businesses in unincorporated Porter County. And so that we have some sort of location, addresses to start with, of people that might be
Well-
appropriate to contact.
Well, what I thought would be valuable is if we could somehow get a demographic of the different types of businesses that we actually have in Porter County. And I don't know, maybe Bill knows how we can even get that.
Well, what I was wondering is how many people that may be in unincorporated areas are still part of chambers in their near city? I've got to believe it, you know, whether they know their boundaries or not, you know, they are going to take advantage of any resource.
Oh, and that's okay, sure, and that's okay. I mean, we're not gonna, if they're in a chamber, we're not gonna preclude them from
No.
providing.
But I'm just thinking that, you know, a lot of people probably tap into every resource they can that's near them. But is there a place where in our own files have these things listed so we actually know who is technically in an unincorporated area and running a business?
Maybe it'd be a good idea, once you identify these businesses through whatever,
Yeah.
is to send out some sort of
Exactly.
survey to them,
Right.
ask these type of questions, and be able to maybe draw some conclusions from that.
Yeah, I'd also love to have some sort of a, you know, once we kind of identify it, if there would be a way that we can have some sort of a business council that potentially meets
Yeah.
and then could come here and present and say, hey, you know, we've met, here's some of the things that we talked about, here's some of the ideas that we have for you as well.
Would the database that you would be looking into, wouldn't it be the tax rolls?
Yes. We would use the tax rolls, and then I was hoping, through talking with Chuck, that maybe we could map that out, so we
Right.
Yeah, that would be great if we could map that out.
in the unincorporated areas. And Andy suggested maybe put together a survey. You could do
Yeah.
it online, you could do it paper, you could do it in person, any way that,
Well, I think it would also be interesting to know where are our businesses concentrated in the unincorporated areas. Where are they? I mean, if you just even think about what businesses do you know in unincorporated Porter County? I mean, we know gas stations, right? There's gas stations everywhere, but what other businesses? I don't even know.
The South Haven corridor.
That's what most of them would be.
You would think.
There's, on the urban fringe, we have some areas maybe in Valparaiso that have kind of gotten off into the county unincorporated areas, but for the most part, I think we just have to go look to see what we have out there. Most of our large manufacturing, whether that's Pratt or up on the north end, that's in a city or a town. And then we have, you know, most of our businesses are centered in the cities and towns, but we have some that aren't. And I think South Haven's gonna have the most of them, of anywhere. And then we're going to have a handful of other options out there. And I think however we want to try to determine what is really out there, I mean, we're just probably going to have to look at commercial zoning and see what is sitting in those commercially zoned areas if they're built out, and then start building our list and come back and see what we have on it. But I would think the vast majority of it's going to be in that South Haven corridor.
And then we have the oddball, like Family Express, they're out in unincorporated 49, and although I don't know if they're very representative of the businesses in unincorporated Porter County. Although they do have the gas stations all over the place and convenience stores all over the place. So there could be some positive input.
Before Aberdeen, I think it's now officially been annexed, right? By the city? But Aberdeen, south of the city?
I don't think Aberdeen's been annexed yet.
Okay, well,
So they do have a pocket of business in there.
yeah, I was just wondering, if somebody has a business there, but they may actually have a physical location there, but they may have considered themselves in the city because of a zip code and where they get their mail or where they live.
Right.
And so you might have some peculiar situations about, what's their mailing address for home, business, and where they're actually located. And I don't know if that's complicated in
Well, I think,
using the tax rolls or not.
I think before we go to the tax rules, if we can go to GIS and we can utilize
Okay.
Chuck, if we start with zoning, he can give us a zoning map of everything non-residential, non-institutional, and get us a list of those commercially zoned parcels, and probably have a map. And then we're just gonna have to go through that map, because not all of the, the sloppiness of that report will be, there are things zoned commercial that are still unimproved. We're going to then go through that list and determine what's been improved. And then we can go to the tax rolls and say, you're a XYZ business and unincorporated, and whatever survey or message we're attempting to deliver at that point. That's probably the fastest way to get from point A to point B, to identify what businesses are lying outside the corporate boundaries of the cities and towns.
And then he can also do it by classification too, whether it's commercial, industrial.
Right.
And just to help out Mary Jane, it's I2, I3. Do we have an I1?
Yes, but we're not as concerned with, those are, I believe, is an I1 smokestack?
I don't know. I can't remember.
I think,
I think I2 is light and I3
Yeah.
is heavy industrial.
so we'll look at the zoning, but we have some industrial zoning in the county that doesn't have, it's not improved at this point in time. Some of that's really old stuff that's been around from the 50s and 60s, from when there was train spurs or potential train spurs and then no train spurs. So we do have some odd industrial property maybe in the south, but there's not a lot north once you get out of South Haven. So,
I guess the one thing that I think about, talking about what Barb was mentioning, I don't know the Highway US 12 corridor, just east of the Pines, if that area is something, when we have the National Lake Shore, the lake, I think, is a huge, it's almost like it's like a hidden jewel that I don't know to take advantage of that area, but I'm not sure if that's all unincorporated. I know the old Pumps on 12 restaurant that closed down, they have Freddy's now. If that would be, get closer to Lake Michigan in unincorporated parts of the county, if that was available to maybe take a hard look at.
Yeah.
Sure.
to give you an idea, to give you some background of that area, we are in that area, but like, let's say, the Goblin and the Grocer, okay? That's technically the city of Pine, the town of Pines, but the lot behind it could very well be unincorporated. That's how close we are in some of those areas around the Pines. When you get a little outside the Pines heading west on 12, we have large areas in there that may be unincorporated. There may not be businesses or zoned commercial yet, but that was before you get to where Chesterton starts. So there's some part of that. And then, the antique shop that's there, I think it's something odd that the building itself, and I could be one or two buildings off one way or the other, but the building itself is in the town of Pines, but the parking lot is actually county. So that's how close some of those areas are. The town of Pines has never, hasn't been a big annexer of property as of recent couple of decades. So we're still pretty close in some of those areas. Now, very little north of 12. Because then you start getting into Beverly Shores and other smaller cities and towns. but I think it's an area to look at. You know, it's one of the, we are all aware of the things that are happening with our eastern county neighbor there as far as the Michigan City and their redevelopment that they are attempting to supercharge there with the NIPSCO plant coming down, scheduled for termination, potentially their DNR station on the water potentially going away. And the city's had a lot of plans, I've read in the paper, about whatever they're planning on doing, but that is right on our border. They've brought their, now, in part of that, they've brought their Calumet Trail all the way to County Line Road on that side. So we do have some pressure in a good way. We have a lot of redevelopment, at least looking like it's going to be redevelopment. I think we also are pretty sure at this point that that prison is going to be relocated to Westville. So there's quite a bit of things happening on that north end, close to the water, close to our national park, that are going to be driving significant traffic down 12, down to our visitor center, to the Fed and State Park. So
Mary Jane, I think if we could get, and we can put it up on the screen if you can get it from Chuck and put it on your laptop, if we could get a map that just shows the unincorporated part of Porter County, so we can get a perspective of where is that? And then if we can overlay that with, the businesses that are in that area, that would be great. I would just love, I don't know if it's possible to say, okay, in unincorporated Porter County, there are 75 gas stations, 35 restaurants, just all the different types of businesses that are located. And then we could actually see them on the map and see where the concentration is.
We'll work toward doing that.
Great.
See, there's different databases out there that we can look at. So we'll see if we can get that.
Yeah, great. I think once we know who the businesses, what the businesses are, where they're located, that might help us decide from a survey perspective, the kinds of information or, what we'd like to ask them. Do you guys like the idea of, those of you who have been on the board for a while, do you like the idea of having input from business owners in terms of something, it might spur something that we might want to do, in our capacity on the board. So I don't know what it might be. They say, hey, we need more of this. And we said, wow, we didn't know that. And that could be something that we could provide.
Well, even like South Haven, for example, there's empty land, right?
Yeah.
There could be several parcels of empty land out there that they just haven't put the infrastructure in because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But if it works for the same situations it did in South Haven, then
Yeah.
be a good target.
Yeah. Yeah. So potential for another TIF district.
Certainly.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Yep.
The other thing that I was hoping that we could do is just to decide if this is the best day and time. I know that this day and time was chosen for the convenience of the last board. And I just wanted to make sure that this works for this board. For me, Tuesdays are really tight, and if we could do it on a different day, but I can do it on a Tuesday, it's just for me, it's not my best day of the week. And I don't know if anybody else runs into a similar situation with this particular day. Anybody have a problem with that?
Tuesday's the best day for me.
Okay,
That's just me.
okay. What about you, Bill?
I'm pretty flexible. I think afternoons are best, and I could probably work with just about any.
How about you, Mike? Are you good?
I mean, this is fine.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I'm trying to make sure that for those people that have a job that they have to be at, that this is going to work for everybody. Okay, well then, when's our next meeting, Mary
Our
Jane?
next meeting is Tuesday, February 27th. 4 p.m. Do you want the time to stay the same, or do you want to change? Is
everybody okay with 4 o'clock?
Yeah.
so it's the 4th?
The reason that I think we need to leave it at 4 o'clock is periodically we have a foundation meeting at 5 o'clock. And that if we tried to do it at 4:30, we could potentially bump into that meeting.
Oh, I meant 3:30 earlier.
Oh, no, I think 4 o'clock's fine.
Or works.
Okay.
4 o'clock is fine. So we have public comment. Does anybody want to come up and,
Can I ask a question on any other items before we get to that?
oh, sure, sorry.
I'm sorry. Just want to make sure Scott might be able to put the kibosh to this question before I even go too far. Just the only familiarity I have too much with redevelopment is through the city. And I was listening to Scott's, I kind of looked into what the county has, and I'm glad that the county is engaging in redevelopment and some TIF, and I think it's a valuable tool. I guess a question I have is one of the challenges, and again, Scott, you might be able to answer this, is that we're having with looking for alternative funding sources that would fit our vehicles for county. With the city of Valparaiso, the Redevelopment Commission, which their budget was a pretty decent budget, but they were able to, we were able to work out where they contributed annually to some of the city vehicles with, I think the reasoning was that they were operated within TIF districts, so it kind of fit a criteria. I don't know if we are more stringent with that, but I guess, to kind of get to it, one of the challenges that we have this year is, for example, the coroner has a 2007 coroner van that needs to be replaced, and it's a one-time offer for the coroner. Here we are, 2024, but I didn't know if this was a board that would entertain something like that for something that's used countywide. And if it fits the criteria, if it's something that we would even consider as an option, maybe not now, but maybe in the future, where I'm just kind of bringing it up and throwing it out there, and it might not even be doable. I'm really not sure, but.
Let me give you the complicated answer, because the short answer is we could right now, but I want you to understand why. Let me go back to the city. Both cities, City of Portage, City of Valpo, have effectively connected all of their TIF districts within the city, which allows them a little bit more latitude in what they spend the Redevelopment Commission TIF money on, because they can make the argument that if we buy a fire truck or a garbage truck or a police car, we are effectively helping this large TIF district. The problem we have is that we're never going to have the ability to connect our TIF districts because we're just so much larger. So the second part of that, though, is that this board's money that we have has not, the vast majority of it, there's a little bit of money in there coming from this first TIF. If it's showed up yet or not, I'm not sure, but besides that, the origin of the funds that this commission has does not have the same handcuffs or requirements that the money that, say, a traditional city's redevelopment commission would have. Because a traditional city's redevelopment commission, their money is being generated by the TIF districts itself. So those are the additional funds coming to the Redevelopment Commission that they're then budgeting, and then they're helping out with other city services that are very arguably keeping care of that area within the TIF district. So the money that we have, money that's coming from lit, money that's come from an abatement, that money is not the same as TIF money. So the money that we are generated and have for the South Haven TIF, we have to spend in the South Haven TIF, okay? But the money that we've received from abatement and from the local income tax budget, that money can be spent on any legal purpose. The difference is that in the redevelopment commissions in the cities and towns, their money's, it's flowing more like a regular budget. Every year, they're getting so much money, and then every year they have a budget, and they move forward. Our money, because it's not automatically generated by TIF, some of it's run out now. The hospital abatement is now no longer paying us. It's just that we've never spent all of it. And the money that we have received from the local income tax budget from the commissioners, we haven't spent all of that either. So that potential money has a lot more potential options than does TIF money when we eventually have enough to have an impact to be able to spend it somewhere. So traditionally, the cheat sheet is you have to spend TIF money in the TIF, okay? We're a little non-traditional because we don't have a lot of TIFs yet. The logic behind the commissioner's office putting the redevelopment commission into LIT was to have that startup money, to be able to start to look at things, to be able to have Mary Jane and Dan Bowditch, and to be able to fund those things as we search around for those right opportunities to put a TIF in. At some point, that is what this board should be budgeting on, is those TIF monies that are reoccurring and coming in. We have not matured to that point yet. So it's a long way of saying, in our current circumstance, that's a possibility. Okay? Now, whether this board wants to take it up, that's up to the board. But there's no statutory reason why you can't. If our money was a different scenario and that was all from a TIF and it was all from South Haven, the answer would be we would need to spend that money in South Haven. And the cities and towns are able to do it a little bit different because they've been able to connect all of their TIF districts, and they can make the prima facie argument that this fire truck's protecting not only the city but the TIF district, and so on and so forth.
So is it the wise thing to do for the board? I guess, is it something that we should do?
Right, and that's for the board to discuss. Yeah, well, and it's a good question because that's a detail within our budget that really is different from the other cities and towns. The city of Valparaiso's general fund, okay, or their lit money, or their wheel tax money, or whatever it may be, is not getting budgeted from from the city to their redevelopment commission. Their redevelopment commission is 100% getting their money from the TIF districts itself based upon that AV and that tax rate.
Well, not to necessarily speak for everybody else on the board, but from my perspective, it would seem that our function is to inspire and promote economic and redevelopment in the county and in the unincorporated parts of Porter County. Everybody knows the instant you drive a vehicle off a lot, it loses value. And so that isn't doing anything from an economic development perspective of buying a corner van in that case. So I think that personally, and we can, should there a situation arise that we want to talk about it, I think from a vision perspective, from a mission perspective, we really want to focus on those things that have a multiplicative value down the road. So the things that we do for putting in infrastructure, then that has the potential of multiplying down the road. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that. The other thing I'm worried about is if we have one department come in here and say, hey, I couldn't get the money through the county council, so I'm going to come to the redevelopment commission and see if I can get the money there. I just don't want this to be a revolving door of people thinking that we're going to shell out money if they can't get it elsewhere. So,
like when I'll go back to the South Haven TIF. One of the options that we had talked about last year, and I don't think the redevelopment commission wanted to, or we got stalled out somewhere along the way, was in order to try to spurn that industrial park to kind of get a little bit more into realization, was potentially paying for the concept plan and which taking care of stormwater in the concept plan, so that that was more closer to shovel ready. One of the problems right now, in fairness to the developer, is until the first anchor industrial buyer or tenant shows up, you don't know if you need 1 acre lots, 2 1 acre lots, and a 5 acre lot. You don't know what you need. So you're hesitant to go spend the money with the engineering firms to figure out the water and a base concept of what would fit within that industrial subdivision with our codes, to then be able to show the picture to somebody that comes to town and potentially needs I-2 zoning. So one of the impediments, and it might be, well, I said we pay for, but what I really would say in the full-throated answer is we reimburse the developer, or we agree to pay. So in other words, in one scenario, the developer pays, we add some more of that TIF money that's coming in back to repayment. My guess is that's going to be a little bit hard to convince the developer, because the money coming in that isn't already going to reimburse some of the developer for some of the cost isn't of a great amount, and that's not going to get anybody reimbursed anytime soon. But maybe it's something like, we go down that road, we explore it, we get an idea of what that cost would be, and then maybe the agreement is on the first sale of the lot or something along those lines, in order to get that closer to somebody. If somebody did show up in Porter County, needed that type of zoning, here's a concept plan, this is pretty real, the stormwater's been dealt with, this is meeting our basic code requirements, the road's wide enough, the lots are big enough, et cetera, what are you looking for? Are you, do you need 5 acres? Do you need something smaller? What's the I-2 type of use? Because as everyone has seen, you need the anchor, okay? Just like the gas station going on the corner will probably bring the other 2 commercial uses in, but without the anchor, that probably wouldn't have happened. But on the South Haven area, that industrial park, that's what we're in desperate need of, that developer's in desperate need of, and we also, because now, we're part of that TIF, that's what we're looking for. And in reality, the county does not have a lot of shovel-ready, light industrial areas that if somebody showed up, isn't, 6 months to a year away of approvals from being truly shovel-ready. This would take a step forward. Those are the type of discussions that we need to have as far as what can we do to get this closer to actually developing out. And that first step would be getting that first anchor tenant. Then the subdivision actually gets built. Then you actually get your road cut. You actually get some of the parts and pieces to go in. Once that happens, that's what normally drives the next ones to come, as we have seen in other industrial parks, whether they're here or other counties or in the cities and towns themselves. So that would be one potential idea to spurn. We do have a few dollars in the TIF to be able to start to do some of those things, and we could look at those. But that's the kind of stuff that we're looking to do, because ultimately, I don't think the board's all of a sudden going to become putting a lot of TIFs in a quick period of time. However, this is our tool. South Haven fits it. Undeveloped, had some issues. We're in there addressing them, put it in the TIF, keep attempting to go down the road with that being developed. And then just so everyone knows, that South Haven corridor on the north side of 6, not every lot, but generally speaking, basically from Bay Road, or the Portage Line, to 149, that on the north end of 6 is commercial zoning on the front, that front lot. There is an absolute sea of light industrial 1 lot deeper. Okay? So, and there isn't a lot anywhere else. And there isn't a lot anywhere else that's on two state roads, centrally located. So the idea of this industrial park was if it started to work, there is an entire swath running behind those commercial businesses that would be in that I-2 zoning potential. I-2 is important because it's not smokestack. Pratt is a smokestack. It has to be one step lower than that. And due to the air quality rules that we're under, I don't even think we could get another smokestack approved, okay? But just so everybody knows, as part of the tools, there's a lot of light industrial zoning up there that just isn't really open. There's not a good way to get to it, not a good way to, there's no, I don't want to say footprint. There's no map there of, hey, I see where this is going and there's some momentum happening.
Do you know Rex Richards?
I do. And he,
I'm just wondering, because he talks about the economic development a lot. And I know that the economic development activities that they engage in have to be adjacent to unincorporated Porter County as well. And I wonder if it would make sense for us to either invite him to come here or a couple of us go and talk to him.
I'd be happy to arrange either. I've
Okay.
known Rex for a long time.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
Kelly's working on a zoning map behind us. Give you some idea.
What is this?
See, there's a,
Working on a
there-
zoning map.
there's a fair amount of I
So Kelly did not get a chance to introduce herself. Kelly, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Kelly Cadwell. I work upstairs in the planning department. I'm the executive director temporarily. So I help out Barb on the commission and I do planning and I'm learning as I go, right? So this is new for me as well and it's very, very interesting.
Kelly, can you talk about the difference between the eyes and what's what?
So I think Scott kind of hit the nail on the head there. I want